since we don't have a chair right now, they've asked me to sit in for the first couple of items, and so I'll call us to order. So let's get an update on appointments.
Okay, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Yeah, and there's a sheet in your little packet there that kind of gives everybody's dates, if anybody were curious. We got that one kind of cleaned up a little bit, but
Second page.
the big one, with Kim and Greg's vacancies, that brings Jeannie and Martin in as full members. And, Greg was also reappointed as an alternate, so he comes back as an alternate, starting this month. And we also have a new alternate, Teresa Brown here, who's joining us tonight for the first time, and we appreciate that.
All righty. Any questions about that? All right, we don't have to take any action there. That was just informational. So we need to appoint a chair and a vice chair. And so I asked about the process on that. Basically, it's just nominations from the floor.
I nominate Paul.
I would second that motion. That's a motion, I'll second that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other nominations, please?
No.
Okay, do we have to vote on these individually or separately, or, I mean, together? I guess individual.
For each, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's individual.
And Paul is willing to serve as chair, is that correct?
Yes, I will. Since I've only got
Sure
2
he is.
years left, I think I can do it for a year or two.
Hang in there.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, so do we have to vote on that? Yeah, I guess we do.
I would just make sure, yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, I'm going to be abstaining.
Extremely unanimous, okay.
Okay, for vice chair?
Let's see.
Well, I'm going to nominate you, since you nominated me. And we are kind of the senior members here, so it only is fair, I guess.
That's your
Do we have a
vote.
second on that? All right, we've got a second on that. Any other nominations for vice chair?
Speak up.
All right, speak now or forever hold your peace. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, we have a chair and a vice chair. I'm humbled, aren't you? Okay, so everybody can see what the agenda is for tonight. Are there any additions or questions? I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, we have the agenda. So we also, in your packet on the third page are the minutes from our last meeting. And everybody had a chance to take a look at them. Any questions or corrections on the minutes? All right. They look good to me, too. I'll need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Second.
All right, I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, the next item will also take a vote. And at the last meeting, we proposed to move the meeting time for our planning board meeting from the quarterly meetings from 6:15 to 5 o'clock. That's why we're starting at 5 tonight. And everybody at that meeting said that it was, convenient and that we would do it for the next meeting. And we would just like to formalize that for all future meetings unless there's a question. It's more convenient for staff. And, if you've got other meetings later in the evening, it gives you a chance to get it done. So, everybody in favor of 5? We're good with 5?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I need a motion that all future quarterly meetings will begin at 5 o'clock.
I'll I'll make the motion.
We have a motion.
I second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Item 7, considering delegating authority to sign notices to the town clerk. So who would like to give us the,
Can we do it?
I can speak to that. The school government said that there is an option to delegate that authority, and if you wanted to, you could delegate it to myself or anyone else. Since I prepare them, I might be a logical choice, but that would potentially speed up the process when, especially the case of special meetings, when there can be kind of time sensitive and we're trying to track down the chairman to come by and to sign that notice. It could be a time saver if you all wanted to do that. It is an option. A lot of cases, we have to get the chairman just to run by town hall and sign these, and it can happen frequently when there's some big projects going on. So that's just something that we want to throw out there as might be a convenience and time saver in those cases.
so the quarterly notices would be, understandable. If you have a special notice, would you run that by the board before we,
Well-
pick a time or whatever, or?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
The regular ones, there's no notice required for those. Special meetings,
Uh-huh.
even like maybe emergency.
Yeah, right.
Those we would work out, and we always get, traditionally, we've always had the chair sign.
Okay,
Sometimes it can be a day or two before they're able to get by, and that can push a meeting back a day or two sometimes.
Mhm.
Some situations it'd be convenient to do that quicker.
any questions or comments? I'm good with you signing them, but I think it would be appropriate, just to have a phone call or something before you actually,
Oh, sure.
sign a notice. I'm sure you would do that, but that's kind of the understanding I would have of the process. Any other questions, or?
No.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to delegate authority to sign notices to the town clerk.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
All right, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. That motion passes, Chad.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 8, review and make a recommendation to the town council on a text amendment application submitted by Brian Franklin, Burnsville ABC Board, regarding parking spaces requirements. Brian, you want to introduce this
Yes,
one?
I might. This came to us, the ABC store, and preparing, and their project application is not ready yet. That'll be coming to you on a future date for design review, which you all will sit in at a future meeting. But in their design review process, and trying to come to those standards, they observed that our current zoning requirements for parking for ABC store were one parking space for every 200 square feet of floor space. Normal retail is one parking space for every 333 square feet. This is about a time and a half difference. So that requirement made it difficult on their project to fit because of the floor space they have. And in thinking about this project, an ABC store generally has less shopping than people are usually going in, going out. There's a lot less time that they're actually spending in the parking lot. So the requirement for that to be much greater than just normal retail seemed a bit onerous on development. Even with their project, and again, they haven't finalized the project, but they're still gonna have about 16, 17, 18 spaces somewhere in there. So it's not like they're only gonna have 2 or 3 spaces. But our current requirement with the square footage they're looking at would require like 25, 26 spaces, somewhere in there, and that just seems a bit extreme. So I told him the best solution going forward for the town would be to apply for a text amendment, have that number changed from the 200 to the 333 that it is for regular retail. So what we're looking for is a recommendation from the board for or against, however you all feel about it, to the regular board. This would go on to the town council but they look for a recommendation from the planning board about this amendment change. So if anyone has any other questions about that, let me know, but that's the crux of the question.
Well, that certainly seems sufficient for,
I thought it was too, and I was sort of surprised that that requirement was that high
That high.
for that type of store. It's, when we redid our zoning ordinance last summer, some of that stuff was just carried over. It wasn't really reviewed. We were looking at other things to meet with 160D, and, you know, we've talked about all those things, those changes that had to come to the state. A lot of those parking requirements were just carried forward. We didn't really review necessarily line by line each one of those about whether it was sufficient, and that's one that's been carried over for years, so.
do we just make a recommendation, or do we sign something?
Chad has a written recommendation that Heather's prepared.
Mhm.
If you so choose, and you can make that, you need a motion and a vote on a recommendation to the town council to approve this amendment change, and then they'll be setting a public hearing and reviewing that at future meetings.
So, you know, I've always looked at the ABC store as just a commercial establishment anyway, so I don't know why we would
I don't know why either.
treat it any differently, so I think it's a good solution to just treat them like any other commercial establishment. I think that's defensible.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would agree with you. The times I've been over there, you know, there's maybe, most I've seen is 5 or 6 cars.
Right.
Maybe I don't go in a busy period. I don't know.
Well, I just judge it by how many people are in there when I walk in, and it's rarely more than one or two. And so, and I'm not in there that often either, but still, it doesn't seem,
Yeah.
I think if it's just the same as a normal commercial
Yeah.
establishment, that should be
200's
fine.
that's extreme.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay?
So, I'd like to entertain a motion that that we approve a recommendation for a tax amendment that would establish the parking requirements for ABC stores to be consistent with other commercial establishments.
Second.
So, can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I just made a
Okay.
motion. All right, and we got a second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the motion passes. Thank you all. All right, item number 9. Review and make recommendations to town council on an application for property owner Tony Ford for a zoning map amendment.
Okay, I hope you all received the information by email. If you didn't, there's some more information in this packet. Mr. Ford is here this evening. This property is, it actually, I would give you an address, but it doesn't have one because it's never been developed. It is the wedge property there between Reservoir and Bowditch Road, where the road split. It's that wedge property before you get back toward Valley Place Apartments. Mr. Ford owns that property. It's 0.93 acres. It's bordered on one side by C2. The other two edges of the property, it's sort of a triangle-shaped property. The other two edges are bordered by R10 in the zoning district. The property itself is listed on our future land use map as residential in use. However, again, that property has sat vacant as far back as I can find, so I don't know that anything has ever been developed on that property that I'm aware of. And Mr. Ford has an interest in possibly selling the property to someone who might develop that property. And he feels that maybe the change of designation, changing from an R10 to a C2, would make that more possible. So a developer would have more options besides just residential. Those were kind of my findings. Mr. Ford is here if you have particular questions about the property itself or anything that I can't answer. But that is the request ahead of us. This property is listed on one of our comprehensive land use map as a potential infill, one that we targeted so many properties within town that have either sat vacant or have infill potential. This was one of those that was targeted as one that would be an infill potential property. report. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? to-
No, you hit the important parts of this thing. When my mother died, my mother was Barbara Ford, and when she died, my brother and I inherited her side of the property from Norman Evans' side of the business. And so I knew nothing about any of this. I just knew what we were getting. And after we settled the estate, you know, my brother and I, we sat down and we were thinking, okay, we need to come up with some kind of plan to run this business, and we don't know anything about this. Mom and Norm weren't exactly inclusive in letting us be a part of the function of the operation of the business. So then COVID hit. That made all of us happy. And so David and I discussed that if we were ever going to sell anything, that was the piece of property to start with. It's all we're doing is paying taxes on the property anyway, which we're glad to do. I mean, we're all sitting here and hopefully my taxes help this board as well. So, you know, the thing is now is that we're to the point where COVID has let up a little bit. We're at least functioning reasonably normally, and we're thinking about selling the property. If we have more flexibility and more ability to look at someone and say, hey, you know, you're not just locked into putting a residential project on this property, then there's more likelihood of selling it at a better price perhaps. And also, it's right there above CVS, Burger King, Rose's. I mean, it's right there. It could function as either at its location, and it's not a bad little piece of property. It's just we're not going to develop it. You know, that's at the end of the day. And so I went to, it was Donna Banks, wasn't it, that I went to, Brian? And Donna and I had a talk about it, and she was gracious enough to look up all the requirements that I needed for you guys and to help us. And I was able to find a survey. So you have a survey in your hands of the property as well. So yeah, I mean, that's the idea. That's where we're headed with this. It would be my hope that if a business wanted to develop something there commercially, that was also benefit the town as well. I mean, that would be the dream anyway. Other than that, Brian, is there anything I'm forgetting?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Do you guys have questions?
For our recommendation to the town council, we have to have a rationale for either approving or denying
That's true.
the proposed change.
We have two different versions, and I can pass these around if you'd like, where Heather has prepared some language, and these can be changed. These are, you know, it's your recommendation. But just, if you would like to give me kind of the gist of what she came up with, and then you can expound further, or again, these can be changed.
I haven't
but,
seen what she's,
the recommendation is this, which one's for or against? Make sure I've got which one's which.
Consistent or not consistent?
Okay. The one against would be that you were saying that this amendment is not consistent with the commercial land use plan, and it varies from the designation of the adopted future land use map. And then they have the vote, and something she prepared ahead of time. If it was before that proposed amendment, the official zoning map of town of Burnsville is consistent with the Burnsville comprehensive land use map going forward. Those were basically the two rationales she had with both of those, whether it was, you feel it was consistent. And again, that comprehensive land use plan does have a future land use map, which is a portion of that document. It also has lists some potential infill properties, which you know, seeking ways to make that property better developed can be a part of that too. So it's basically your decision whether you want to recommend or not. The ultimate decision will lie with the town council, because this will still go for a hearing and those types of things. Your recommendation will be a part of that hearing of whether you all feel it should be recommended or not.
any questions or observations?
I've got a couple of questions or observations, I guess. I went and looked at the property, and it's sort of low. It's at the bottom of the road. The shopping center is about 20 or 30 feet above it, and so it's pretty isolated from that. And it's sort of isolated from from the bank as well, because they own a larger piece of property, and there's a big green space. Pine trees have grown up in there. And my concern is about largely the residential uses there that are already existing. And C2 is such a broad category. I mean, I feel like office uses would probably fit in there okay. They provide a good transition from office to residential, but retail gets a little, especially if it's fast food, though, it's so isolated back there, I don't know if anybody would actually see it as a
Well,
retail
you know, in
use.
fact, I was thinking in terms of business or office spaces as well. I can't see, if it was on the bypass, it would be
Yeah,
easy, this would be a slam dunk.
right.
And you're right, I mean, the location of where it sits is a little bit isolated back there. And of course, you know, then you have the shopping center above.
Mhm.
And my hope would be, at least if I were to try doing the thinking in terms of putting something there commercially, my hope would be is that it would be something that would be transitional, that would take a office building, someplace, you know, something that would fit in where people could go to work, do their thing, go home. And it would be that type of thing. I agree with you as far as that goes. I cannot see putting, you know, something in there that would require a lot of
A lot of activity.
yeah, a lot of activity,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. A lot of shopping, that kind of thing. I don't see that being a good use for that property myself.
Yeah.
I see it as office space. I see it as that type of thing myself. And that's what I would choose to do.
Yeah.
If I was gonna develop it, that's what I would try to do.
Yeah.
That's what
But
I would try to
you're
do.
right, that
That's my concern.
That
That's
designation
your interest,
basically
but-
leaves it open.
Yeah. Well, you know, the person that buys it, once it's rezoned, then they've got the whole
Right.
gamut. They do
Yep.
whatever they want with it based on that zoning category.
Right,
We had just office zoning,
right.
they're good for that. I happened upon the Yancey Economic Development Report that came out recently. And they were talking about, and I see this on the Burnsville Hub all the time, people are always looking for apartments and we can't find anything. All the single-family houses are going to Airbnbs, so there's no place to rent anymore. And it seems like, you know, it may be beneficial to consider, you know, apartments on that site. You could probably get 8 of them on there. something
You
like that.
could, if
It's
I
a nice
had the money to
flat.
even do that, I would do that. I mean, I'm
Find
selling the
something.
property, certainly COVID hurt us,
Yeah.
big time. I will be honest, I used to work at Duke University Medical Center. I saw this coming, I dug a hole, I pulled the dirt in after me. I saw what was gonna come in, and I've got comorbidities anyway. So ultimately, as I looked at this situation, we've had at least 2 pieces of property where I evicted somebody just prior to COVID, and they destroyed the property. Right now, we are in recovery trying to, and Brian has been wonderful helping us, because one of those houses is just a mess. And it's gonna probably take us another 3 months before we're able to really get that to where I'm gonna even be anywhere near happy. You know, these are not palaces that I inherited to begin with, I wish. But they are, they're good homes, and we do rent to HUD clients. And unfortunately, the person that I evicted from that was a HUD client, but they decided to get revenge, and my property was, and it sat empty. I mean, it sat empty for 2 years. It's still empty. and that particular house, which if you drove up there, I'm sure you drove by.
So let's get back to the property
Yeah.
in question. So anything else?
Well,
No.
I've not seen it, but does it have good access off?
Oh, yeah.
If you drive on Bowditch Street, there's an entrance right there, actually. In fact, I got a little irritated because somebody got in there and cut donuts around it from the last snow. They decided to cut donuts in the entrance there. I mean, it's entirely accessible. You know, another business that could go in there that, and I mean, I don't know that we actually need this in the town, but I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion. You could put a small storage facility in there. But, you know, there's one being built down the road on 19E there, not far from
Yeah,
the high school.
Multifamily
And,
places,
you know,
right.
that would work there too. But yeah, there's good access.
Right there, those are the apartments.
You can get to
And
it.
that's the
It's nice and
intersection of
flat.
Bowditch and
Yeah.
Especially on that side.
Yeah.
The other side's
and
got
it's down here.
Reservoir.
Right.
It's this whole triangle right
Exactly.
Oh,
here.
okay.
Well, and that would require me to be
Yeah, we went and looked at it
grading, but-
yesterday, and it
They
was,
could probably get an
Yeah,
entrance in there.
okay.
Just,
So-
and this may be helpful, Mayor, I'm just trying, but I thought I would look through real quick to see exactly what was allowed in R10, just so you know what the
Great.
limitations currently are. Of course, almost all residential uses are there. Beyond residential, the only other real uses, if it remains R10, would be civic, institutional type stuff, religious institutions, public buildings, schools, hospitals, libraries, those types of things, assembly halls, recreation facilities. I was kind of curious looking through what was the limitations. So certainly any residential use would fit there, but those
And
beyond residential, that's.
You can have a small business in a home if there's certain types of home businesses that can,
Yeah, and home occupation, yeah,
Right.
that's always allowed for somebody to do something at a place that they live. But
Right.
The main focus of R10 is residential.
so if you look at the map in your future use map in your package, it's kind of hidden. When I first looked at this piece, I was right about where you are. It doesn't really make sense because
Why that's cut
it's
out.
bounded on, over 2/3 of it by existing, contiguous residential. But the property that's a half-acre lot right next to it, the one at the bottom of the hill, that's covered by the yellow arrow, it's actually also on 2 out of the 4 sides is commercial, because the bank property, if you look underneath that arrow, comes all around. So if you look at those 2 small pieces together, they're already surrounded on 3 sides by commercial. So when I was asking Brian about some of the details on this, my thinking was, if we were to approve this or recommend this to be commercial, then that little half-acre lot right next door to it probably ought to go commercial, and then it would just be, it would be a smooth transition.
The bank has a large piece of property
Yeah.
that,
So right there,
basically in forest,
right,
and it's also in a low area, and I don't think it's developable. It's got a creek going through it. Now,
yeah,
right on the corner, I guess the town has a little storm drain that, from the floods we had.
collapsing.
It's got a little issue there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would develop really as commercial, that beyond the bank.
That little piece at the bottom, I think it'd be similar to this one, as
Yeah.
far as it just gives it a
Yeah,
little,
the other house, that's got a single-family house on it that
right. Now,
somebody
both of
paid too
those,
much money for, I think.
both of those properties too, in my opinion, are well buffered to the residential above them. So, the large complex has a pretty big fill on the bottom of it. It's all in white pines, and so they own and control their own buffer to this
Yeah.
property.
That's true.
And the other half acre across the way is somewhat buffered from the multifamily up above it, in that there's just a good distance. It's a good distance away, and there's a lot of vegetation
There's a
there.
hill and vegetation as
So
well.
if these two at some point in the future did become commercial, especially if they were like a business or something like that, rather than and I agree, I don't think fast food would go there. They would be buffered from the residential as you go up the hill, because you've got topographic change and you've also got vegetation. So if we were to change this, I would say at some point in the future, we'd want to look at that little half-acre lot in the future use map as going to a commercial estate, commercial as well. I'd be honest with you, I'd go either way on this one. Anybody else?
So let me get this correct. The R10 designation does not cover multi-use, multi-family dwellings.
It doesn't cover what, I'm sorry.
Multi-family dwellings.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
Apartments,
any
yeah.
type of residential use, if you get over more than 4 units, that's a special use regardless of what it
Right.
is, due
The
to
commercial.
having to meet our design standards.
And then that would have to
Yeah.
go to a commercial designation.
Yeah, but if it's any residential use will fit into R10 except for the commercial accessory entertainment structure, I think. And maybe I think that's the only one. Hotel motel is not allowed in R10 as well.
So it's 10 units per acre.
Yeah.
So the report that you were referencing that called it an indwell,
Infill,
Infill?
as part of that process with that comprehensive land use, we identified a lot
Right.
of properties that had infill potential for development within, instead of expanding their boundaries, having development within. That was one of the properties.
But it didn't-
There was a list of 10 or 12.
it didn't talk about what that infill
No,
should be. It just means it's
the
vacant
particular
property
kind of infill, no, it's just
Yeah.
a property that was
available
ripe for
for,
development
Yeah.
for something.
well, except for the multifamily housing, I think it's got limited value for residential, myself. So it'd have to be apartments or something like that. And it is kind of a weird piece of property.
Quite honestly, I wonder why they bought it. There was part of me that went, really? You know, what are you gonna do? And with Mom and Norm, it you know, could have been anything. I mean, even the gray building, that's the apartments that we own. That was gonna start off to be daycare. And then they got fit of sense and realized, oh, maybe we don't need to go into that business. And they turned it into apartments. And that's, you know, that's what we're dealing with now. That has 8 units in it. And then the rest are houses that they bought. And I remember one of those houses was moved up there, actually physically picked up and moved. So, you know, that's essentially, if you start at the bottom of that hill just behind Savemore, what David and I own is everything but JT's house. JT is the second building after on the right as you go up that street. So.
Bowditch.
Yeah.
So it'd be on the right of Bowditch as you go up.
Yeah, because it's a bank on the left.
Yeah.
It's a hill. And
That's up.
then we went all the way to where the street divides and splits. And so, you know, when we got it, it's kind of an odd property anyway. That whole thing was kind of odd, and the way Mom and Norm bought it, I'm not sure how it worked out if they bought that piece of property when they bought the other piece. There's a 6-acre lot there, Donna and I talked about that, there's a 6-acre lot that has most of our buildings on it, and we're thinking about having it resurveyed so we can break it up into specific lots. Because it's one big, huge piece of property, this 6 acres of land. And I'm sitting there going, you know, why they did that way, I don't know. But then they have this, and it just seems like an odd, strange piece of property that you go, what are you gonna do with it? And David and I came to the conclusion that, yeah, if it's costing us money, we need to sell it. We need to do something with it. And so ultimately, my thinking was, if it went to commercial status, then it would be a great little place for offices. But, yeah, I can't see shopping in there, or fast food, you know, that's not, I don't see that being something that would be viable. Burger King's off the beaten path enough anyway. I mean, it's trying to get to that
You can
sometimes.
see there's smoke going up, so.
Exactly.
So again, the question for the board will be whether you recommend the change or not.
Yep.
And we have one prepared either way, so whatever you all decide, but at some point it'll take a motion and a vote one way or the other.
I guess my take on it is because it's undeveloped property, whatever would be constructed on it, regardless of the designation, would have to be vetted. Regardless.
If it's commercial property, it would have to go through design standards
Right.
and design review, that is true.
So,
It-
you know,
Residential necessarily may not, but commercial would come back through, you know, you go through the design review process, whatever's there.
right.
But now if it's an allowed use and it meets the design standards, it would certainly be something that could be developed there.
So there's still oversight regardless of
Right.
whatever may be built on the property with the designation as a commercial. So,
Yes.
Does everybody feel comfortable with possibly making an amendment to change the zoning map on that to a commercial?
Well, let's just put it out there and see what happens. So the motion I sense that you were making is that we would recommend to the town council that Tony Ford's application for a zoning amendment would be approved, is that correct?
That you all would recommend.
Yeah,
that they
that we would recommend approval of the change. Get a second on that? I'll second it, just to bring it up for a vote.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. So let's raise our hands so I can see how many. I can't hear with mask on. I have 4 ayes, and so as an alternate,
don't
does
know.
Teresa get to
Way to
vote?
go over the rules.
But that's okay.
I'm just going along.
Well, we know if she were a voting member, she would.
Ignore me.
It's gonna be.
Well, it's good to know that she does
Yeah, I
agree.
didn't know the last time I did
I'm
that
fine
was
with
not.
it.
So I have
I'm
4.
not sure about Martin, which way?
It's okay
Yeah,
to say no. It's okay to say
We can
no.
just put a flag up the council and I'll be that flag.
Right, so it's,
Yeah, it's not about you, it's about.
Oh, no.
Oh, please.
I
Because
have-
that category is so wide, and, yeah, if it was just office, I'd be all over it.
until I
I would think that there would want to be oversight no matter what,
Yeah.
who was
Yeah.
putting anything on that property. I would be
Yeah.
like really thinking.
Yeah, we have limited ability to control that. But we could, raise concerns and
Yeah.
have some requirements for buffering and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I had the same feeling you
Yeah.
did exactly. As I looked at it more, I just felt like it just doesn't lend itself to a residential type use there. I mean, there's a lot of other property in the town that's undeveloped or vacant that would be much more appropriate for apartments or something
Yeah.
like that. And so,
I know it's hard to find a piece of property that supports apartments, because
Yeah.
typically the market wants to go higher,
yep.
and there's, seems to be a lot of people around looking for $1,000 to $1,200 rent. But it's not available.
Okay, and
I'd
so,
like, be nice to see it marketed for residential and then pursue the zoning, but.
And just procedurally, so you all know, were this to be approved by the town council, that, they take a recommendation and they approve it, the future land mass the future land map, that will change automatically. There's a process in there for that to automatically change, so that particular part will
Okay,
change
as-
on our future map, were it to be approved at the regular council meeting.
And I'd like the rationale for our recommendation to be that the property is buffered from the adjacent high-density housing that's already there, and that the bank property, and that the characteristic of the area lends itself to a higher use, I guess is what you'd call it.
Sure chance getting all that down?
I can help you with that afterwards if you like.
All right.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts? Mr. Ford, thank you for coming in, appreciate it.
Thank you all, I really appreciate it, and hopefully, yeah, hopefully that piece of property will find something that can be done with it that'll be useful to the town.
Yeah.
You know,
Good
as
luck.
well. I mean, not just the people who act, not just the person. I want it to be helpful to the town too,
Yeah.
so maybe it'll work as well.
Well, that's just one step, there's another step that's gotta happen.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, when it goes
Oh, yeah,
before town
yeah,
council.
exactly, I realize.
All that'll come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that, and that'll be on the 12th, I think, right?
I don't know.
The way that actually works on it, they'll have the next regular board meeting, they'll set a public hearing,
Yeah,
and then that public hearing will most likely be at the following board meeting.
okay.
They'll have the public hearing most likely before the meeting, or at the early parts of the meeting, and then make a decision during that meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, I'm sure I'll be in your office before, remind me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys take care, thank you.
Okay. The next agenda item is to set a date. No, review and recommend the town council the new subdivision ordinance draft.
All right,
So y'all have that.
About, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, month ago, we're all, y'all received a copy of our updated subdivision ordinance. Our previous one was dated 1969, I believe, and it charged a whopping 25 cents per lot for every subdivision. So it was in dire need of an overhaul. Heather worked on this for, I think, quite some time, and then later on, I helped out, Chad's helped out. We all kind of pitched in to try to get the document to something a little more updated, but still something that fits Burnsville. We used Wilkesboro as a template, and then took from that and found some other things. Paul came by today, or was it yesterday? They all run together anymore. He had found a few typos, a few places where Wilkes County, Wilkesboro was still in there. Those are still corrected. I talked to Heather, she said with those just being typos, there's no real need to redistribute a brand new copy and print on new copies, because it was mostly clerical errors and then one formatting issue, but all those issues that we talked about, Paul, have been fixed. And if anyone, this is an opportunity to discuss if anyone has seen anything else that causes concern, or any other, definitely any other typos for sure, those types of things that you've seen in there. And then what we'll be looking for at the end is either just a straight recommendation with the changes that have already been made, or if there's something else that comes out from this discussion, we have a space on this form. If there's additional changes that you'd like to see made, we can do it with these, recommended with these changes. So the group can have any discussion they like. If anyone has questions, I'll do my best to answer those.
No questions.
Don't everyone talk at once.
Our concerns, that's good news, that there's no question or
I had
concern.
one question, and it's about the overhead utilities, and I don't know if they're required to be underground when you do a new subdivision.
I don't know that that's a good question.
Because there's one requirement for street trees. So, to be,
And again, a lot of this was boilerplate stuff that we
Yeah.
borrowed
It
from
was under-
Wilkesboro, and trying to find something that was both protected surrounding
Yeah.
areas as well as being as developer friendly as we could.
it was under sections 7, I can't remember what the original number was, but I had 7, and section F was about the street trees.
Okay.
But I didn't see anything about the utilities, the power. And I don't know if Rich Rod's interested in doing that, or, because it's our system. A lot of it.
Which page in particular were you on? Did you have a page?
No, I didn't have a page
Page
number.
30 is 7
7.7.
I think I got an older copy, because my 30 is off. I grabbed the one that I had on my desk.
Yeah, it just said street trees shall be planted along.
Okay, yeah, here it is, street tree, never mind, I'm sorry.
So it seemed like depends which side you put the power line on, and you don't want to plant large trees underneath it.
You're right. I think the only thing we're talking about with power and electric, we talked about street lights a bit, how those were necessarily required. We don't have a requirement in here necessarily about that the utilities have to be underground
Yeah.
onto the property.
So you just have to work that out when the site
And-
plan comes in.
Yeah.
Street trees go on this side, and power on that other
Right.
side.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
It would have to be an ask rather than a requirement, since it's not in the regs. But,
Yeah.
I mean, when folks come in here, they often will take our
And that's true. And again,
recommendations for
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that if we've got a good rationale for them, so.
Yeah, this sets the main sets of rules, but then we have those, all those subdivisions that would get approved who come through this process, just like the last one did when we had, I guess back in the summer, Mr. Thomas, when he came through. So certainly, the aesthetic type things or those type of considerations can be brought up at this time, at that time, whenever a particular project comes up. Anyone else see anything, or Martin, did you see anything additional?
Look good.
Did Heather answer your question about the streetlights?
Yeah, I had asked a question about, since we're a dark sky community, could we put in dark sky requirements for the streetlights? And she basically didn't feel that we had the authority to do that.
Yeah,
Right.
we're not, I think just that park up there is all that's been designated officially as a dark sky park.
Right, where the observatory is.
Yeah, where the observatory is.
But,
And it's, I don't, I'm not a developer, so I don't know that process, but she and I were discussing that this morning, and I said, I don't know if they're asking for streetlights, is that something that they install, is that something they ask French Broad to install, and if so, does French Broad have, they've been replacing some things around town that I noticed direct the light much more down. Of course, then we get some complaints from the people in the neighborhood that they're too bright because they're putting all the light straight down. They're not, you've heard a few of those arguments yourself here and there through the years through town council meetings. So, but if you are away from that light and looking at it, then you can tell that the light is not being radiated. It's actually putting all the light straight down. So you make some people happy and you may make some others upset. I don't know with whatever you wind up doing with lighting sometimes.
I think
And
French
do
Broad
think
puts,
that-
I think French Broad puts them all in.
Yeah.
If it's on a public street, then it becomes public. And if it's on a private subdivision, then the homeowners association would be.
Right.
At least that's been my past experience.
Okay.
But if we set a standard for those lights,
Mhm.
then they would have to meet them. But
Right.
based on what Heather said, it doesn't look like we've got
Then
it.
you have the situation where those streets wind up being dedicated back to us and become
Right.
public streets.
Right.
And then they wind up being ours anyway.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts about it? All right, I'd like to have a motion that we recommend approval of the new subdivision ordinance draft.
I'll make that
We
motion.
have a motion,
I'll
second? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Made the motion, Jim, second. Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're good there?
Awesome, yes.
All right, next item, 11?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We've got a few new members, and it's been a while, I think, since there's been any sort of, maybe some educational things about some of the roles that everybody plays. I know our next, regularly scheduled meeting will be April, is that right?
April
Yeah,
12th.
is my math correct, April? I thought of maybe sometime late March, and you can set a date or just say you're agreeable, and maybe we talked about by email, of having an opportunity where we have a special meeting and just kind of go over maybe prepare some type of PowerPoint kind of thing and just go through a fairly short meeting, but just kind of go through some of the basic things, the different roles that you all serve in, how those fit, and sort of maybe run through the process with things like, you may not know how a text amendment works once it goes from here. Make sure that we were all kind of on the same page, just doing a short informational thing at a workshop. And then if there's anything additional that anyone would like to bring up at that time, that'd be a good opportunity when we're there. We don't necessarily have a particular project we're considering. So it was more of an idea for you all to think about. If you're open to the idea, we can look to see what we can put together. And we were looking at maybe late March area, but sometime before our next meeting. I feel like, from what developers have talked to me, I feel like that April meeting is gonna be pretty full, or we might just do it on that April meeting.
Right, yeah.
I feel like we're gonna have several projects coming up in the springtime, that you all are gonna have to be looking at. So maybe having a separate meeting that's just focused, maybe shorter, and just focused on
So you're
getting
thinking
everybody.
30 minutes to an hour?
Yeah,
something
somewhere
like
in that's what I was thinking of, and Heather had mentioned maybe some things that she might like to have included on that. I don't know what those are exactly, but just things along those lines of more of an educational type thing to get everybody on the same page, because we've had some changeover of membership.
Everybody good with it? Is there any day of the week that works for folks? Is Tuesday as good as any, or would you rather do a Monday or a Wednesday?
I think Tuesday
Is there
works
good-
for me. I have
Okay.
fire station on
We'll
Monday,
look at
so.
Tuesday at the end of.
Tuesday, end of March, say the 22nd or the 29th?
2/29?
22, 29.
Oh, 22 or 29, either one of those.
Yeah, why don't y'all check with Heather? And
We
then-
will,
And
okay.
then if whichever of those two, just get it out so we can block it out.
That'll work.
And 5 to 6, okay?
Yeah, that works.
Is this meeting time okay?
All
for
right,
everybody?
Yeah, it works.
so we'll do
Awesome.
5 to 6 on the 22nd, and if that doesn't work, we'll go with the 23rd, I mean 29th.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
That's all I have, guys.
All right,
Very good.
so the next regularly planned meeting is April 12th at 5 PM. So I'm looking for an motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay?
All in favor, say aye. All right, we're done. Thank y'all.
All right, thank you, folks. I appreciate it.